people in interviews sometimes are a little squirrely or nervous, or they don't think they're going to get every little piece out just right. And so it's really a skill to hear what somebody's actually saying and then to be able to say, okay, those are the words they said, but here's what they're actually trying to say, and to take it one level down and to have them read it and go, yeah, that's exactly what I meant. That's a skill.
Hey, beautiful humans. Welcome to the Bold Women in Business podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Honeyman, founder of Honeybee Bold and fellow bold woman in business. This show is all about highlighting women who are changing the world, helping other women, and kicking ass along the way. Let's dive in. So today I am so excited to welcome my friend Liz Heflin onto the podcast. Liz and I have been connected on LinkedIn for, I don't even know how long. It's been a long time.
Years. I'm going to put it at years.
It is years for sure. And we've just been in each other's orbits and we've gotten to know each other, and it's just been such a pleasure. She's a freelance writer, nonfiction ghostwriter, and editor. She's been doing this since 2006, which is pretty incredible. She's also the founder of Mace Writing, which is her content marketing consultancy. She decided that wasn't enough, so she started another arm of her business to help freelance writers succeed. She runs a community called the Inkwell, which is all dedicated to helping freelance writers do their best work. And as if that wasn't enough, Liz just started another arm of her business because, we don't like to be, why not? Why not? And I'm going to let her actually talk about what this new arm of her business is, because she just explained it to me so beautifully right before we hit record. So Liz, why don't you just give us a little snapshot of what this new part of your business is?
Yeah, so it's not too out of the realm of what I've been doing over these last 18 years, but I have decided that I really want to hit full-length book ghostwriting for sort of high-achieving clients. And I've done a lot of ghostwriting over the years, but it's never really been a focus. I mean, I got my bachelor's and my master's in creative writing. My heart's always kind of been in long-form writing in various ways, shapes and forms. So I'm really excited. I feel like this is a big shift in my business, but it feels so much more aligned with kind of where my heart is, where I want to take things, and kind of like a smart shift with the landscape right now. There's a lot of bumpiness in content marketing, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But but this feels like a shift that's kind of good all around for me, and I'm really, really excited about it. It's brand new, but there's some interesting potential collaborations on the horizon that I'm really excited about that I absolutely can't talk about yet. But
That's really, really exciting. Can you give us a sense of like what types of clients, without naming names, but
Sure.
what types of projects these are? Obviously book length projects that spans a pretty broad range of things. So if you could just give us a little snapshot of what that looks like.
Yeah, so it kind of falls into a couple different buckets. So there's people who have just really incredible stories who've worked and achieved to get to really great heights in whatever their respective fields are. And that's kind of typically more like the memoir route. Just here's who I am, here's how I got to where I am, and following that trajectory. And these are typically people who have a little bit of name recognition. You'd probably kind of know them. So there's a really nice kind of built-in, people are already interested about the story because they know these people. And then there's people who are kind of in the entrepreneur vein. They have businesses, they're executives, they're founders, they're CEOs or leaders. And it's kind of, that can either be a sort of how I built my business or a lessons of success. Here's how I built this really incredible engine and here's what makes it run. So kind of some different avenues you can take with it, but always incredibly interesting stories, interesting people, and just like, for me personally, selfishly, like a masterclass in all of these different things. Like I just get to like pull the curtain back and see, oh, like that's how somebody takes a business from a garage to this incredibly successful thing that it becomes. So there's a lot of selfish aims in there just because I'm interested in the stories personally.
Yeah, and I imagine one of the things that's most fun about ghostwriting is like you're almost like get a front row seat
Yeah,
to someone else's story, someone else's vision, and you're bringing that to life, which is super cool.
totally. And you get to pick, and this is true in a lot of freelance capacities, but you really do get to pick and choose who you work with, which is nice. So,
Mhm.
you get to tell the stories that feel important to you, and you get to dive deep on things that you think, should have a spotlight on them. So it's a very, like I said, I'm just really excited about it. There's a lot about it that I really love.
Yeah. So how do you, there are a lot of ghostwriters out there. Like, how do you differentiate yourself from other ghostwriters besides for having 18 years of experience, which is hard to beat, but how do you do things differently than other writers? What's your like unique Liz magic?
I think there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle. I think having done this for such a long time gets my foot in a lot of doors. I think that buys me a seat at the table in a lot of ways. So even if I'm exactly the same quality writer as somebody else who's only been doing it for a year, I just kind of get that extra little bump just because I've been doing it for so long. I also honestly think my LinkedIn presence has been a huge boon for me. And I didn't think about that at all when I jumped onto LinkedIn and started building there. That wasn't the idea. But there's a lot of credibility that comes with having a semi-large audience on LinkedIn. You have the ear of a lot of people, and that catches the attention of prospects. So there's kind of that piece of it. And then I think sort of, and this is a trait that a lot of ghosts do have, but it's really being that like empathetic interviewer. That's so huge in the process. Is, people in interviews sometimes are a little squirrely or nervous, or they don't think they're going to get every little piece out just right. And so it's really a skill to hear what somebody's actually saying and then to be able to say, okay, those are the words they said, but here's what they're actually trying to say, and to take it one level down and to have them read it and go, yeah, that's exactly what I meant. That's a skill.
Yeah, and I think that you and I have talked about this a little, how even though I mean, I have done some ghostwriting in my life, but I'm many years away from that, but I think that there's so much overlap in the work that you and I do, like our approach, even though on paper it looks totally different, but
Yes.
that's kind of my approach to brand strategy also, is just that really empathetic interview, right? And getting deep into like, what is the brand? Why do you exist? What
Yeah.
makes you unique? And I've heard that exact line so many times, like, oh my God, that's like exactly what I wanted to say. And I didn't even know how to
I
say it
didn't even know
myself.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so I
Exactly.
think it's like it is such a skill, like learning how to listen, really, really listen to someone and understand what they're saying,
Yeah.
hear the things that they aren't even saying, right? And
Yes.
listening between the lines.
Exactly. And just always kind of doing it with that customer centric idea in what is their goal with this project? What are they trying to accomplish? That's one of the first things that I establish when I'm working with somebody on a project like this. Like, what are you trying to get out of it? Because there's a lot of different
Mhm.
things that a book can do for you. If you're trying to bolster a speaking career, that's very, very different than trying to get eyes on your business or charity that you run. There's just the way that you approach it and the things that you emphasize, and how you craft it. It's just all very different based on what that client. So that's a huge piece of it too.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your process with because I've done ghostwriting of articles. To me, that feels so much less daunting than like a
Yes.
full book length project. Do you have a particular process with how you kind of make it more approachable for you as the ghostwriter?
Yeah, I basically, and I'm very upfront with any client about this. I'm like, I will do the heavy lifting of the writing, but that doesn't mean that you're completely off the hook for like being a collaborative partner in this process. So I
Sure.
like to front load all of our work with as many interviews as I can get them, as many Zoom calls, as many phone calls, as many voice notes as I can get out of them right up front, because that gives me the most kind of holistic view of the entire story. And then we can kind of get into the nitty gritty of, okay, what's the real arc here? What are we really trying to accomplish? And we can actually start kind of crafting out an outline and getting a little bit more specific and okay, here's what we want to start with. Here's what chapter one's going to cover. Like all of the nitty-gritty stuff. But I really do just want to get a total sense for them as in the most fire hose way possible. And that kind of does two things for me. It gives me the content I'll need to actually translate into the story, but it also lets me get insight into them, how they think, how they
Right.
speak, some of the cadences of just like how they would phrase something, because that's also obviously a huge challenge with ghostwriting is making it sound like not you is very
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah.
And so learning some of their kind of isms and even just how they would even think, just kind of how they would connect the dots. And you just get that from okay, let's jump on a Zoom call and let's chat. And it kind you can kind of start to piece together and get that idea. And obviously it's not going to be perfect the first go around. You can't get into somebody's head in that way in that short of a time, but that's what the editing process, when that piece comes in, that's what that's for. Saying, like, I wouldn't really say it that way, and you go, okay, how would you say it? Let's get that fixed.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And kind of coming back to that empathetic listening piece of things, which I think really is a superpower in and of itself, is like doing that really well. And I imagine kind of similar to me, where I'll have people come and they're like, I have no idea like who I am as a brand. And I don't know. They almost feel like they have to do some homework beforehand. And I'm like, no, 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 we're gonna mind this. Like we're gonna figure this out. Do you ever have people come to you who are like, I don't know what the story is. Like I know that I have something to say, but I have no idea what it is that I want to say or how I want to say it. They're totally lost. How do you kind of navigate that challenge?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Part of it is usually like the people who are coming to me at least usually have an inkling that a book is on their radar. So they're usually not coming to it 100% cold, but there are definitely people who are on that spectrum of scattered versus not scattered. Some people are just much more focused. So if they really are just, I don't know even where to start. I don't know what's good, what's interesting. I don't know what I want the narrative to be. That's where I just get them talking.
Mhm.
We just start the interview process and we just kind of dive in and we start. Because you usually find that, the first couple questions, the first couple, even hours of interview over the cumulative interviews is just kind of like scratching at the surface. And
Yeah.
then they sort of settle into the process, and then you start finding the gold, the stuff that they didn't really even know was there. And they're like, oh, actually, like I'd never really thought about it. I do it that way. That is an interesting way to frame it. So it is just getting that like whole story, information, deluge picture, and then saying, okay, where's the real arc here? And if they're a little lost in that process, that's part of what a ghostwriter does. I mean, that's a skill you can lean on of theirs, and just have an external set of eyes and ears to say, okay, I listened to your story and here's what I found really captivating, and here's where the story kind of following. So
Yeah.
being that kind of springboard, that soundboard, I should say, is also very much part of the process, because not everybody comes to you ready like, okay, here's my outline. I know exactly what I want to talk about. I know exactly like detail to detail what's going to be included. So just being that like listening partner and even an accountability partner, just somebody to like keep them on track and to keep the
Yeah.
project moving forward is all sort of nuance and aspects of the ghostwriting world.
Yeah, and I'm sure that also every project is kind of different in terms of like how long is it going to take? I'm sure that's one of the questions that you get from your clients, like how long will this whole process take? And it's probably very hard to answer that question because it's so dependent on
Yes, it
what's
is.
the story, what's the client, who's this client, what are we dealing with here? And there are so many factors to that. Do you have a kind of like general timeline for things if everything is going to plan?
If I have a client who's very available to me, because that's also a challenge. Sometimes clients are just so busy that getting that interview portion is like the lion's share of the timeline because it's just so hard to get, FaceTime. So that can definitely be a stumbling block. But if everything kind of lines up, 6 months is a very realistic time frame to put together a full book. And that's usually, a month to two of editing, 2 to 3 months of writing, and then the rest of the time is kind of the back and forth editing. And that can be, expedited if it needs to be. But usually the pieces that get expedited would be the actual writing piece, the part that I'm in 100% control of, because I'm
Mhm.
not in control necessarily of the interview timeline, and I'm not necessarily in control of the editing time. That's a very client to client situation.
Sure.
And I can put guardrails on it, right? I have like a limited number of revisions so it doesn't just drag on and on and on for forever, and okay, this is going to get published in 18 years. But yeah, it's 6 months if everything is kind of at a normal, nobody's going crazy, like nobody's burning the midnight oil to try and finish this project. That's kind of a normal pace.
Okay. Okay. So most of the audience for this podcast are fellow female entrepreneurs. So I'd love to kind of shift gears to talk about the like running a business side of things. So we all have our reasons for starting our businesses. And, I think that there are a lot of personal reasons. There are a lot of maybe, values driven reasons. Some of it is just like practical reasons. But tell me, like, what lights you up the most about your business today? And I'm sure that has shifted over 18 years since your business has evolved and changed. And kind of like, so how has that shifted over time?
Yeah, again, such a great question. So when I started, I was just literally a college kid. I mean, I was just a baby. And my goals at the time were just, I don't want to go get some crummy campus job. Maybe I can do this thing that this writing thing that I know that I enjoy. And so like that was my main motivation. I was just like, can I make money and not leave my apartment and just wear my pajamas? That was like my number one ultimate goal. And by George, did I do it. And and then as more and more as I started to realize, like, okay, I'm not just kind of doing this gigging thing on the side. Like I am running a business. I always was, but it took me a couple years to kind of have that mindset shift of being like, okay, what I have is actually my business. And I kind of needed to buckle down and treat it a little bit more seriously, with a little bit more reverence than I was. And then I just realized very quickly that being in charge of my own time and my own schedule really mattered to me, and being able to travel was a very big part of my 20s. My husband and I, we traveled a ton. We lived abroad, we worked abroad, we did all of these things, and I was able to do a lot of those things and say yes to a lot of those opportunities because I knew that my career was just kind of coming with me. It was so portable. And so that was hugely important to me, and I really started to appreciate freelance in a new way. And I just, in a way that I was like, I don't think I could ever leave. I feel like I'm such a lifer. I was like, I would not thrive in an office situation. And
Yeah.
then I had my kid, and it became a whole different ballgame. And just the fact that I could really be present in both of these parts of my life that I care so much about that was just the icing on the cake, right? That I have a job that's flexible enough that he's having a bad day at school, I can go grab him, and it's not like I don't have to totally rearrange my entire life to make that happen. And I'm also very lucky my husband is also has a remote job, so we're both very flexible in that way. But yeah, once family entered the equation, it just freelance became, I didn't think I could love freelance more, and then I loved freelance even more. So yeah, it definitely has evolved over the years, but just having that freedom over your own time, your own schedule, who you work with, having that kind of autonomy, and just building something that's yours, not somebody else's. Right? Like we put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into these careers and these jobs, and more often than not, unless you're working for yourself, that just goes to building somebody else's vision and lining somebody else's pockets. So
Yeah.
being able to build something of your own is really special, and it's not to glorify it too much. It's hard too. It's not for everybody, but if it is your path, it's very rewarding.
Yeah, and I think that I think what you just described, so many female entrepreneurs especially can relate to that. Like I think that there's, I mean, we all have felt it, right? Like the pressures that come along with being a female entrepreneur. And so or not being a female entrepreneur, right? Being in the workforce, like there's just a lot of pressure on
Yes.
on women. And
You
so
are.
wherever you are. And so I think that a lot of women are drawn to this path because of that kind of like autonomy and freedom and being able to kind of set your own path. And I think that that's the biggest kind of like pull for many people. And what's interesting though about what you're talking about, because I can definitely relate to this, is like kind of like going from I'm a freelance writer to I'm a business owner, right? And
Yes.
like now my business has shifted and I'm not really doing freelance writing anymore, but I think even for people like you who are, that's the bulk of what you're doing. I mean, you're doing a million things, but but probably the core of what you're doing is still that where you started with freelance writing.
Yep.
It's just kind of evolved over time, but you are a business owner, and like kind of that mindset shift is really key. And so that brings me to my next question, which I think is such a key thing that not every business owner has thought about, which what three words or whatever, however many words you want, come to mind. We're word people, so you can say more words if you want. Come to mind when you think about like your core identity pillars as a business owner. Like when you talk about having autonomy over what types of clients you work with and like what, kind of setting that core, there's a core identity to how you're running your business. Like what words come to mind when you think about that?
I know you gave me three, but I'm gonna do two. I'm gonna keep it
Okay.
really because I feel like it really does get at the heart of what makes my business tick and run. Quality and dependability. Like I feel like those are my two pillars. And honestly, they feel like low hurdles to pass, bars to jump over, but they really a lot of people fall down on them. And so there's the quality piece where you really are getting a well done product, which leads to people wanting to refer you out, which relieves a lot of the pressure of constantly hunting down new jobs. Like my business has very much been built on the back, not exclusively, but very much on the back of referrals. Just people who were happy with my work and said, "Hey, you need a writer. I've got somebody who's great." So there's that piece of it, and obviously drives results and pencils out, right, the fees make sense for the product that you're getting. There's that whole thing, but then the dependability piece, just showing up, meeting deadlines, doing what you say you're gonna do, not over promising and under delivering. There's so many people in this field now, which is great. But it also just means there's a lot of people in this field who aren't ticking all of those boxes, hitting all of those benchmarks. If you can deliver a really great product consistently, and then also you can be easy to work with and turn everything in on time and always show up to meetings and respond to those emails and do all of those things, then you're golden. That's
Yeah.
that's that's what a client wants. They want quality
Yeah.
and they want an easy working experience. Like to boil it down and make it as simple as possible. That's what they want, and that's what I strive really, really hard to provide for any client.
And I think coming back, we touched on it a little bit early, the current market, right? It's like impossible to have a conversation about running a writing business without talking about AI. I think that when we think what the market looks like right now, how saturated it is, plus how much companies are starting to rely on AI in different ways, I think that the quality and dependability pieces become so much more relevant. And I mean, they're always relevant, but like they become less of a given. And so I think that when a client is really looking for something that's above and beyond, like above and beyond is actually, I think, in some ways what was once just like the expected
The
norm.
expected norm. Yes. I agree. I 100% agree. Yeah, there have been some just sea changes in this landscape, and they've come on fast. And I because I do a lot of coaching, and I do I speak to a lot of people, especially people who are kind of just starting out or are at the very least in the early days of their freelancing career. And yeah, it's disheartening out there. It's rough out there. And people who don't kind of have the systems to fall back on, the years of backlogs of clients for referrals, like all of those sort of safety nets that people who've been doing it for a long time have, it can feel really, really tough out there. But sort of for a more positive note, the flip side of that coin is it's not really all that difficult to really make yourself stand out and to really be a stellar candidate, if you really do just deliver quality and do what you say you're going to do, if you tick all those boxes. So
Yeah.
it's this weird time where it feels super saturated and everything feels so bumpy and up in the air. But if you can just kind of be that stalwart and that easy to work with person, that there's still a lot of great clients out there. There's still a lot of great work out there. Even if it doesn't always feel like it when you've pitched to your 500th person and nobody's responding and it's really disheartening. But like if you just keep pushing forward, good stuff can be at the end of that tunnel.
Yeah. And so would you say that that's kind of your biggest advice to new freelancer? You get a lot of these questions like, what do I do? How do I start this? How do I make a successful career in this?
Yeah. I mean, I tell them to kind of look for the quicker win things because there's a lot of ways you can land clients, right? But some of them really are just inherently long games, very much including like LinkedIn, right? If you're building a personal brand there, that could be huge for your business, hugely influential. You can find a ton of work that way, but it requires consistently showing up. And it's very rarely do you just kind of jump in and start posting, and then a week later somebody's like, "Hey, do you want to work together?" Like it's much more the cumulative effect of consistently showing up. So looking for quicker wins. One, I've talked about this on a lot of podcasts before, but looking for people who are hiring for an in-house position that you could do in an interim freelance capacity. So you know that they're looking for, you call it a head of content or whatever the role might be, right? They're looking for a copywriter because theirs went out on maternity leave. So you know that they're actively looking for somebody to kind of fill this gap. And instead of coming in-house, you can offer your freelance services. So like just ways to drum up work a little quicker than some of those longer those longer term ones, which are very much worth doing and should be done, but maybe not if you're relying on them to get money and work in the door right away. And
Yeah.
and also just being really realistic about it too. Because like if you're doing it and you're banging your head against the wall and nothing's coming of it, there's no shame in going and finding a job in the interim. Maybe you do that part-time and you still are pursuing freelance. Maybe you do it full-time and you do freelance on the weekends. Like I feel like there's this reluctance to do that, like it's giving up or something.
Yeah.
And I just want to
Yeah.
like throw that narrative out the window because there's like doing what you need to do to keep the lights on, how whatever that looks like for you. Like there's no shame in that. It doesn't like freelance is there waiting for you when the time is right because it's
Yeah.
your choice when you jump in, it's your choice when you jump out. And I just see a lot of people feeling like a lot of shame and hurt around this idea of leaving the industry when it's just not working for them right now. I wish that wasn't the prevailing narrative in their minds.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. I mean, I think that also I talk to a lot of newer freelancers also and I did freelance on the side for 15 plus years before finally taking the leap, officially going out on my own. I had to find the right time for me. And it was always a goal of mine, at least for ten plus years. It was a goal of mine to start my own business because I always had that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, I guess. But I had to find the right time for me. And like, I felt like I wanted to gain certain experience before starting my own business. And I think everyone has their own journey to find their path
Yeah.
and I totally agree with you. There's no shame in taking a path that is maybe not as straightforward as someone else or doing something on the side for a while or in between things. And I think that being open to finding that path is really, really key.
Yeah. And I think I think, in my story, people hear, oh, like she started in college and then just kept doing it. That makes it sound like, oh, I started, I immediately got traction, and then it just grew exponentially from there. Well, that's not really the full story.
And now you're a gazillionaire.
And now
That's
I'm a
that.
gazillionaire, and I'm calling from my private island. But like I've been with my husband forever. I've always had a double income safety net.
Yeah.
And that allowed me to take a lot of risks that if I had been single, I probably wouldn't have been able to take. Just logistically, it's just my own heart and brain wouldn't have like survived the stress of that.
Yeah.
So I have always had that safety net, which has given me the chance to take a lot of risks. So just to say that, like, whatever your situation is, there is never one cover-all way that freelance happens. Everyone plays off of their various advantages and works through their various disadvantages, and everyone can get to a point of whatever success looks like to them. But yeah, I think it's important to talk about that yeah, I was able to do some things, take some risks that I absolutely would not have been able to take if it had just been me, myself alone.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's such a good point. And I think it's true whether you're in freelance or you're running a landscape design business or you're whatever you're doing, right? I think that understanding entrepreneurship it is a bumpy road, like inherently. It is not a straight path. And so bumpy doesn't necessarily mean bad. There are going to be ups and downs and you have to expect that, but it also means that it can take a lot of different shapes and forms. So, yeah, I think that's such a good point. And yeah, the privilege of having a safety net is
Mm-hmm.
cannot be understated or
Yes.
overstated, right? It's really that is a huge piece not everyone has. And so if
Yes.
you do have that, great. If you don't have that, that doesn't mean that this path isn't
Yes.
isn't accessible. It just means that it might look a little different for you. Um,
Exactly.
and so
Exactly.
that actually kind of ties into my next question, which is um, you've built this business that has taken a lot of different shapes and forms over 18 years, and you're kind of like moving into a little bit of a different path currently. But um, if money were no object, tomorrow you just got like a deposit of you know $5 million and you have
Sure.
all the money in the world, what would you be doing differently in your business?
It's really funny you asked that, because if you had asked me a few months ago before I kind of decided to make the shift into full book ghostwriting, I'd have been like, I'll probably make the shift into full book ghostwriting, or or doing full book writing for myself, right? That's still where my heart lies. But
Mm.
yeah, I really do feel like this shift to writing books. I mean, that's been my dream since I can remember. I mean, I was that kid that always, always, always knew I want to be a writer. Like I have little preschool things like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a writer. Like it's just always been the path that I knew I wanted to take. So I really do feel like this more recent shift in focus anyway is very much aligned with, if I had my complete and absolute druthers and take everything else off the table, this is probably what I would be doing. So that's part of why it's so exciting and why I'm so optimistic about this path forward, because it just feels right in my bones. It just feels very aligned with where my passion is, where my skills are, right? Like where what I do best, and what I enjoy, and just really getting to deep dive with clients and really learn them and know their stories, as opposed to just kind of, okay, we're gonna meet for 20 minutes once a month and we're gonna, pump out some content blogs. I also love those clients, and don't get me, I did that for many years, but there is something really special about the level that you get to know somebody when you're doing a full project like that. Is just
Absolutely.
very cool.
That's incredible. I can't tell you how much I love to hear that. Like, this is always one of those questions that can either make people like pause and think and say like,
Like get a little
I don't
sad.
really know. Like, I don't know what I would be doing differently. I wish I could be doing X, Y, and Z. Or they say like, I'd be doing exactly what I'm doing,
Yeah.
which is like actually a really powerful recognition for a lot of people. Oh, like I'm on the right path. It's just I just have to find how to make that path work better for me.
The
But like
logistics,
it's not
yeah,
about
right.
yeah, which is always that's an ongoing challenge.
I feel
Well,
like, at least in my business and in my journey, a lot of these, because I probably had about like 4 or 5 really major shifts and turning points over this career span. And I feel like they've always been preceded by moments or periods of difficulty, right? Like something changes kind of unexpectedly around me, and all of a sudden something doesn't feel aligned anymore, or I know I need to make a shift, or oh, this client dropped out and I wasn't expecting that, and now I need to fill this hole. Those just kind of a little bit going back to the landscape, right? When you're in those moments of difficulty, sometimes those are the best places to really stop, take a breath, assess,
yeah.
and figure out what a more meaningful path forward would look like for you, because you have this kind of opportunity to hit it. So I was definitely seeing some shakeups and some changes in my content marketing work for a lot of reasons, global economic reasons, client specific reasons, AI, like there, a whole cumulative mishmash of things. And it forced me to stop and go, am I really bringing to the table? What do I really want to do moving forward? So taking those dips not just as a hair on fire panic moment, which is takes a long time to wrap your head around that. That's not something you just wake up being able to do. But tempering the panic and saying, oh, what's my new path forward? What shifts and changes am I going to make? What am I in control of? What can I do moving forward here to make things better?
That's like such a golden nugget right there. Like I think that is such a key thing that any entrepreneur is going to face at some point, like those moments of what am I doing?
Yes.
And I think that it's such a good opportunity. And I tell this to my clients all the time, like when people come to me, it's usually because something is not going right in their business. And like they're having that moment. I don't know why. Like what something is not clicking. The people that I want to reach are not connecting with what I'm putting out there. I don't know how to get that to connect with them. When something isn't going right, it's an opportunity to take a step back and what can I make here? Like, and that doesn't mean like you have to completely overhaul your business or you have to, like there are a lot of different ways that can look, but understand that those moments are an opportunity inherently. Like it's just something to learn from and to take as a chance to like change something in your business. And sometimes that can be like beautiful adjustment. And it's really, I think that's such a good point.
Yeah. And like you say, it does not have to be burn the house down, start over. It really, really doesn't. Sometimes it's just a small tweak. Like, I mean, again, coming back to me, I had done a lot of ghostwriting. I knew I enjoyed it. Just making it more of a focus, making it more of an emphasis, really pouring a lot of time and dedication into that. Even just kind of reframing it in that way can really light up some little light bulbs above your head and go, oh, maybe this is what this is the path I should be taking forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is always such a pleasure chatting with you. There were so many good pieces of this conversation that I'm sure people are going to really, really enjoy. Where can people find you?
LinkedIn, always. I spend way too much time on LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn is always good. If anyone wants to reach out to me, they can always email me. That's just Liz, Liz, at lizheflin.com. Pretty simple. Yeah, they always either of those two ways you can get a hold of me for sure.
Okay, fantastic. And we'll include that in the show notes. Thank you so much. This was such a pleasure always.
Always good to talk to Rachel Honeyman.
All right, beautiful humans, that's it for today's episode. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Bold Women in Business podcast, hosted by yours truly, Rachel Honeyman, with music by Shmookalele. This show is brought to you by my company, Honey Be Bold, where we build bold, unstoppable brands and websites for kick-ass women in business. If you are a female entrepreneur or dream of being one, and you want to take your business to a level that no one can resist, reach out to me at hey@honeybebold.com for a free vibe check. Honey, be bold. See you next time.